we are back. Traitors, episode 6. And as y'all see, I'm in different places. I'm trying different stuff out to see what's gonna work best. Because I want the quality, all the quality. When I say the quality, I want what I'm producing to be as good as possible, especially for this show. This is my favorite show to review because of everything we just watched. Like, stuff like this is what I love to review. But just want to keep the quality as good as possible. I think the mic is doing good. Hopefully it's doing good. We can hear. But yeah, enough of that. If you are new here, please thumbs up the video. Please drop a comment. Get the engagement up. These Traitors reviews, I feel like they should do a lot better. And I would like for them to do a lot better because I love them. But the engagement I do get is good too, because y'all actually talk to me, those of you that do jump in. And the show is good. It's such a good show. But yeah, thumbs up the video, drop your comments, subscribe if you are new. And we're going to go ahead and get on into it because we had a very, very good episode. God, let's go. All right, so we get back. And we find out immediately that Bergie was the one that was attempted to be murdered. Which, of course, we know there's no murder because he had the shield. So in my mind, I'm like, oh shit, it's about to get real interesting. So the first three at breakfast are Kate, Parvati, and Sheree. Parvati's feeling nervous because she's hoping that Bergie doesn't have a shield, which, of course, she would hope that because it wouldn't give him away. But Kate thinks it's a Bravo girl that's going to be added to get ready to go, basically, at this point. She thinks that there's going to be a Bravo girl that's going to go home. And she thinks that's because she was added to the cast, which adds another Bravo girl to the cast. So she's thinking the numbers game. And there's a knock, and in walks CT, Dan, and Sandra. Dan is stating it's a huge risk to do the murder that they just did because he flat out told, Bergie flat out told Dan that he would vote him out. And Dan's like, that's a risk that he's willing to take. And Sandra thinks that John might be gone because he's the most faithful of faithfuls. So Phaedra walks in next. Everybody's excited to see Phaedra. And I'm like, Phaedra's, her social game is top tier. Like, everybody is excited to see her. Nobody would want to vote her home. And MJ comes in next as well, who was awfully quiet this episode. MJ, I don't think she got any kind of like confessional time. She didn't even get any screen time, which was interesting because MJ's been a hot target. So she's falling to the back, which is good too for her game. But Phaedra is frustrated because Dan wanted Bergie out. She didn't want him out, but Dan wanted him out, which essentially is not good for Dan, but it's great for Phaedra low-key because nobody's suspecting Phaedra. But in walks Peter and Kevin. Peter is looking at Dan and Parvati because he already knows. He's feeling confident. He's like, I know my strategy is in play. We're going to see if they really do it, because if they do it, then I got y'all asses. I know I got you. So Dan is trying to contribute to the conversation now, which is kind of backing up what he was saying he was going to do the last time. If I don't get murdered, then I'm going to take a shot. Now he's starting to try and contribute to conversation with suspicions of what he's got going on. And he says his theory is that someone who voted for him, he thinks it's somebody who voted for him, and he thinks it's an easy pin, pretty much an easy way to pin it on them to be a traitor. So they realize that it's down to John, Bergie, and Trishelle. And they all voted for Dan. So essentially, Dan, you're not looking too good in my mind. I'm like, 3 people that voted for Dan and you already got suspicion on you, that's not good. So Peter is praying to see John walk in because the minute he knows that John is safe, he knows for a fact that they try to take a shot at one of the other two, which is Trishelle and Bergie, who have shields. And then he knows his plan worked because they're going to be blocked and they're still going to be here. And guess what happens? In walks John and Trishelle, and they start thinking about Bergie. Everybody in there is thinking about Bergie. Peter goes up to John, daps him up, and says, like, game on, because he knows his plan works. Because he knows Bergie's going to walk through that door. And Dan and Parvati, they're caught. And it's clear as day. But Dan is feeling good because he thinks that Bergie got murdered. Like, he thinks he got murdered. Parvati's sitting there trying to put on her best performance. Like, oh my God, Bergie, what? Bergie, no, Bergie. Peter then tells Trishelle as well, game on, because Trishelle knows too that Bergie's about to walk through that door because he got a shield. So everybody's going to be shook. And guess what? In walks Bergie. And Dan looked like he saw a damn ghost. He had this smile on his face, but it was like the dead smile, like, oh shit, like what the fuck just happened? I was dying laughing. But Bergie walks in and lets them know that he had the shield. And Peter is sitting there smirking his ass off because he know he just did it. And Dan is shook. Peter ends up dapping up Trishelle and says, checkmate, like, checkmate, bitch, I got y'all ass. And Dan and Parvati, like I said, they sitting there looking sus as fuck, but Phaedra is looking real faithful. Like, Phaedra, she got a good poker face. Phaedra knows what she's doing, and she's playing the game the way she's supposed to play it. But Dan knows the plan backfired, and now at this point, he's got to figure it out. So Peter reveals his plan to everybody in there and says, like, the plan was in play. He had told everybody that, well, not told everybody, but he told 3 specific people that he had a shield when he didn't. And then the whole plan was to expose the shield. So he pretty much said that they tried to get Bergie thinking that he didn't have the shield when he actually had the shield, which is why he's still there. And Parvati knows that she's exposed. She says she's going to think about blaming Dan. And she's blaming him because of the decision that he made, because it made it clear. Like, it fell right into Peter's hand. And Bergie is saying that they leaked it to the people that they thought were traitors. And Sandra gets up, who was the traitor? Who did you leak it to? Because I didn't know. Pretty much saying, like, I wasn't a traitor. I didn't know what was going on. So we know that a traitor is the one that had the information. So who did you leak it to? Parvati and CT and Dan. CT was not looking shook, but the other 2 were. Like, you could see Parvati looked like her stomach like just dropped. And Dan's just sitting there looking pale-faced. And CT was looking, CT was like, okay, it's probably one that they thought it was me, but I'm not tripping. CT gave the energy that he just was not a traitor. But CT says, well, you told me. And then Parvati jumps in and says, Peter told her in confidence, but she kept it to herself. And then Dan jumps in, obviously, because the other 2 done said it. And then Peter already knows. He already knows that Peter knows that he's the other one that he told. So he's sitting there saying, like, you leaked it to me, but I'm not the traitor. I'm like, okay, that was not convincing Dan. Dan is so interesting seeing him in this episode because he did a horrible job. A horrible job. I've never seen Dan do such a horrible job with covering his tracks. And he didn't do too hot this whole episode. But Phaedra said, you ain't tell me. And I was laughing because I'm like, she the only traitor that is not even being suspected. And she's the only traitor that is not in the trap. Like, the 2 other traitors fell into the trap. She's not. But Phaedra feels good because Dan and Parvati are in hot water and it ain't her. And I'm like, I don't blame you. I feel good too. But Alan walks in and lets them know that they need to have strength and balance for today's mission. So they get ready for that. Dan knows that Peter got his ass and he underestimated him because he's a bachelor. And he now knows he has to adjust his game. And I'm like, yeah, you underestimated him, but I did too. I was not expecting Peter to come in here and play the way he's been playing. And I am so impressed with the game that he's playing. Like, he is literally outplaying the gamers. Dan is literally notoriously, in my opinion, the best player to ever play Big Brother. And then you got Parvati, who is literally one of the top players to ever play Survivor. Probably one of the strongest females, probably top 5. And the bachelor, the one who out here giving roses, kissing and making out with 15 different women, is out here outplaying y'all. It's crazy. Crazy. But they ended up dispersing, as they always do after breakfast. Peter and Bergie, they're excited. So they go around talking, saying that he didn't know. Peter pretty much said he didn't know for sure that the traitors were actually going to try and vote for Bergie, but he was hoping that they would because it would expose everything that he's trying to expose. And Peter peeped Dan and Parvati's body language. He also noticed how CT was unmoved. Like, CT did not give off an energy that he just got caught. So he knows for a fact that it's Dan and Parvati, or at least Dan or Parvati. That's one thing I want to elaborate. They keep saying Dan or Parvati. I'm like, y'all don't think it could be both of them? Like, it's a good chance that it's both of them because there's multiple traitors out here. But Peter tells Phaedra and MJ that Parvati couldn't even look at him. And he pretty much asked Phaedra, did anybody leak it to you? And Phaedra says she never heard it. Like, she says she feels bad for Parvati and Dan in her confessionals. But it's every traitor for themselves. And I'm like, I know that's right. And later on, we know that that is true. But Parvati is now trying to convince Peter that she's not a traitor because she already knows that he's on her case. Dan is walking around. Well, he didn't walk around at this point, but he stopped like in the middle of the hallway trying to eavesdrop. So Parvati and Peter, they're in the kitchen. And she's saying, you say you've been planting seeds. She's pretty much said that you've been planting seeds this whole time. So how are you not a traitor? And I'm like, Parvati, you're not doing a good job at trying to plead your case because you sounding guilty. It's like what she's doing now is throwing it back on him to pretty much say, oh, you think I'm a traitor, so what makes you think you're not a traitor? And it's like you're not doing a good job to plead your case in that instance. But Peter says that it's obvious that, what did he say? Peter said it's obvious that she doesn't think anybody is sus of him. And he ends up asking her if she's sus of him being a traitor. And she says, yes. She said, because you're gaming too hard. I'm like, not really. Like, he's gaming. He's definitely gaming, but he's got some actual logic behind his gaming and actually has some proof and got your ass. And it's like, Parvati is also interesting to see her play like this too, because she's playing pretty, it's not as smart as she typically plays games. Like the two big gamers were just scrambling and you could tell it got them rattled. I guess because they didn't really expect it to happen, they had to think fast on their feet. So Peter was not buying none of that shit. But Peter said, tell me why you aren't. Tell me why you're not a traitor. And he said, any info that you tell me, I might get off of you. And Parvati's like, in her confession, she's like, get off of me. Like, he's literally on me and I'm trying my best to like defer it. And Peter's clocking how she's not giving him any information because she wasn't giving him any information. And Peter is, like I said, out gaming the gamers. So Parvati knows he's on to her ass. Dan is outside pacing. So Parvati leaves. Dan comes in and sits down with Peter, and he's trying to figure out what went wrong between the two of them. And Peter flat out tells him he's pretty confident that it's between him and Parvati as the traitors. So he flat out just bluntly said, look, you don't even need to say nothing to me. I already know it's one of y'all two, if not both of y'all. And Dan says that he thought it was weird how he had played the decoy thing with the whole shield situation, but he thought it's because they were tight. Dan's trying to play it off like he's not nervous, but he's nervous. He's shaking low-key. But it wasn't convincing either. But Peter said, I'm going to just be honest. I'm pretty convinced. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I'm pretty convinced, and I'm likely going to take my shot. That's essentially what he was saying. But Dan is concerned because he knows Peter is not wavering. Peter is pretty headstrong. He knows what he knows. He's confident. And Dan knows it's a strong chance that he's going to put your ass on the hot seat. And he's used to having his back up against the wall, so he's trying to see if he'll actually come out of it. I'm like, good luck with that, because you done jumped too high up, and they got you. But it's time for the mission. They head outside to begin the mission. And, of course, they can add $20,000 to the pot. Let me read the directions. All they have to do is fire a cannonball from a catapult. The catapult is at a launch site out in the middle of like some hill far, far away. So the catapult also is not already assembled. So they have to get the pieces along the way to bring it there, to then build, to then catapult whatever they got to catapult. So they have 1 hour to do it. If they can get it done in 1 hour, they get the money. And, of course, there's a shield up for grabs. It's only one up for grabs this time. And there's, like, I think, how many boxes? I think it was 5 boxes. Shield ammo boxes. So if they get one of those, that's what qualifies you to play for the shield if you get the shield, if you get the catapult thrown. So that's pretty much what it is. That's pretty much what that is. I talk so fast, y'all, that sometimes I'll be mumbling and jumbling up words. But Trishelle wants that shield because she's paranoid. She thinks anytime that she's going to be getting murdered, so she wants to protect herself at all costs. Peter knows that he's a hot target, so he wants to protect himself as well. So they end up beginning. They start running through the woods and stuff. There's a river with a strong, strong current that they have to cross. Most of them are scared. Sandra ends up getting caught in one of the currents. Which, Sandra, what the hell is going on right here? I know she played Survivor again recently, but is that what that's from? I don't know what the hell happened there, but something happened. But she got caught in the current. Bout went flying the other way, but she had Sheree and Parvati right there with her. Trishelle ends up seeing a shield box as she's trying to cross the current, and she's with Kevin, and she pretty much is like, let me get that shield. And he's like, no. And they literally start trying to fight as they're trying to get through the current. I'm like, dumb move, Kevin, because like Trishelle ends up getting it. And at that point, she can use that as any type of ammo she wants to get your ass out. But CT and Phaedra, I had to mention this, they holding hands. You know, they've been flirting all season. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I like their vibe together, low-key. I love-key like their vibe together. But Peter ended up getting his shield box. Dan didn't want him to get it, obviously, because he wants to get him murdered, or at least get him banished tonight. But Peter said that he don't care what anybody thinks. He got to get that shield because he knows he's a high target because he's pretty much the only one that's really shooting at the traitors, and he knows that he's shooting at the traitors. But Sheree ends up getting a box. They ended up asking about the boxes and stuff, which ones is heavy, the box or the bags, so they're carrying the bags too with the pieces. And Sheree says, shit, the bag is the heaviest part. Like, that part was funny to me. But they ended up dragging the pieces, and like I said, it's heavy. And they ended up realizing, like, the pieces are so heavy, at this point, we need more people holding on and helping pull because most of the girls were carrying their bags and their boxes. So they start putting the boxes and the bags on the shield, on the sled, whatever the fuck it is. And they all start pulling it. So 30 minutes are going by. They're making wave a little bit, but there's another shield box. Sandra ends up getting one. They have 10 minutes left. 10 minutes left, and they're still not up there. And I meant to say, I'm purposely saying it like this because, like I said a couple missions ago, some things just don't seem like it's actually happening in real time. Ain't no way they finish this in 10 minutes. But Parvati ends up going for a box because she wants to kind of like throw them people off, thinking that she's too scared to be a traitor. So she wants to go get a shield to kind of throw them off. So Alan's up there and tells the girls, whoever puts the box on this little hay barrel are going to be available for the positions to get the shield. And every girl starts running. Trishelle ends up running, drops her box. Sheree gets there first. Trishelle, Parvati, and Sandra take their boxes. They get up there, and Kate is now with the box. Because keep in mind, the boxes are on the sled thing, and the rest of the crew is still pulling the rest of the shit up. So they're not even up there yet. Kate has the box, knowing she didn't get the box, so she's sitting there contemplating if she wants to actually go put it up there herself so she can enter herself in. And Alan asked her, like, are you going to keep it or are you going to give it to somebody? And she's like, and he pretty much asked her too, like, who do you think deserves it? She says, nobody. I was like, exactly. Kate is hilarious. But she was pretty much saying, like, she feels like it's desperate to fight over a shield box. So she ends up giving it to Peter because Peter ended up seeing it and started running. Like, this bitch ain't about to take my damn box. So he ends up getting it and puts it up. So like I said, 6 minutes are left. They start assembling. They start assembling that catapult in 6 minutes. And they got the shit done with like 30 seconds left. Don't know how the fuck that happened. Like, logically, it just don't make sense to me. But whatever, it's a TV show. But they added 20,000 to the box. So now it's time for the shields. Peter, Sandra, Sheree, Parvati, Trishelle. Those are the 5 that get to do the catapult. So they start catapulting their little ball onto the target. And whoever's the closest to the center gets the shield. All 4 girls go. And Sheree was the closest. Peter's the last one to go. And Peter was completely off. So Sheree ends up winning the shield. And I'm like, she didn't even need the shield because ain't nobody suspecting Sheree as a traitor. Sheree might actually make it to the end. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it. Because Sheree is too slow to be a damn traitor. She's too slow. I don't think anybody would ever suspect her to be one. And even if she was one, I don't think anybody would think she was smart enough to even be a traitor. But Sheree is safe. She's happy, of course. And they end up getting in the car to go back to the castle. And Kate is asking Sheree and CT how they feel about voting Dan. And the girls are positive that Parvati is a traitor. They're onto something. The other car is suspicious of Dan, which is like Kevin and John. Dan, Parvati, Trishelle, and Peter are all in a van together. I was like, oh, quite interesting. You put the right 4 in one van. You got 2 against 2. But Trishelle then asked Dan how he feels about tonight, like what's the vibes. And he says that he knows he's under the gun, but we'll see. And Dan is pretty much thinking that if he can present a decent enough argument, he can convince them that he's not a traitor. Peter then asked Parvati, can I ask y'all for the murder to be as painless as possible? Because at this point, he's like, I'm probably going to they're going to try and murder me if I don't get banished because I don't have a shield. And he knows that they know that he's on to them. And it's true. And Parvati says, like, get off of me. Like, he can't keep doing that. She said he can't keep doing that because if he keeps doing that, I'm going to have to kill him. And she's like, at this point, you're going to have to get murdered because you keep trying to get me out and you keep putting all this attention on me. At this point, I'm going to have to strike at you before you get me. So she basically said he's going to have to die. I'm like, okay, Parvati, like, everybody's going to know for sure that you're a traitor because he's been putting all this heat on you. And if you end up killing him, of course. But they get back to the house. Peter comes in saying that it's his last meal. And he's sitting there talking to Bergie, Sandra, Sheree, John, and Kevin. Bergie says it's between Dan and Parvati. And I'm like, again, it's both of them. Like, think about both. But Parvati's walking around and she tries to walk in the room and Peter shuts the door as she's walking in and she starts laughing like, oh my gosh, here we go. He's literally trying to she knows he's rounding the troops up. And they all believe that Parvati is the traitor. And Parvati, she don't like the game that Peter's playing and wants him gone. I'm like, you just mad because he's getting you. You just mad because he got your ass and you getting ready to get got by the bachelor. But he lets her in after they have their little conversation. And she says, everybody in here plotting and scheming, like y'all planning and stuff. At this point, she's making it obvious that she's a traitor. But she's asking them to fill her in on where their heads are. And Bergie says Dan's name is definitely out there. And she's like, so is my name not out there? Or are you just saying that without saying it? And Bergie was trying not to say nothing, but she was literally pressing him. He's like, yeah, I'm saying it without saying it. And I'm dying laughing. But Parvati says she's not surprised because it's such that Peter, Bergie, John, Kevin, and Trishelle are all locked in like this. And one of them could be the traitor. And Peter says, yeah, you're right. We could be. I could be one of the traitors. Peter's playing it off the way you're supposed to play it. But Sandra knows that Parvati's lying. Like, she knows her game better than anybody in that house. And she knows it's her. But John then asks what her instincts are for the night. And she says that she's been trusting Dan, but she doesn't trust anybody 100%. I'm like, why would you say that you've been trusting Dan when you know for a fact that they literally are suspicious of him? But okay. But Dan is out here scrambling. He pulls Peter again and asks him for an open ear when he states his case tonight. And he said he doesn't know who the traitors are, but he's focused on one player and he's going to shoot his shot. He's planning to go after one of the traitors. And he's trying to forewarn everybody in the house that he's about to do that. And in my mind, I'm like, you better not go for Phaedra. You better not go for Phaedra. Wait for it. But they head down to the round table. Here we go. Let me get ready. Let me get ready. Because, boy, I wrote so much. Because there was so much being said. And I want to get every bit of it out. So they begin. 22 minutes in. Here we go. It's awkward silence immediately. Nobody want to say nothing. Dan then decides to speak. He says, and I'm going to read it verbatim. He says since day one, he's been watching one person. It's time for it to come out. They doing all the suspense music. He says that he's been collecting info, so let's play a game. He asked a question. He said, everybody raise your hand if your name has been written down. And then he says the least sus people are the ones that raise their hands based on actions. Bergie, Sheree, Phaedra, Sandra, and Parvati's names have not been written down. They didn't raise their hands. So he says that's where he starts. So then he says, look at the voting patterns. Who's voted weird votes? Every one of Sandra's votes have been banished, but she's explained herself, so she's out of the equation. So he eliminates Sandra from being suspected as a traitor. So then he moves on to Sheree. Sheree had one weird vote. She explained it. She's out of the equation. Bergie just goes with the crowd. He's out of the equation. Now that's left to the other two traitors, Phaedra and Parvati. Those are the only two left. I'm like, ooh, shady boots, shady boots. Be careful. Be careful, Dan. Because you think you know what you're doing, but you don't. But you about to find out. But he says Parvati's only vote outside of the norm was Kevin. And then he says the same thing. She explained it. And she's still suspicious of him as well. Now he's shining the light on Phaedra. Phaedra is the one that he's wanting to target. I'm like, you got me fucked up. Keep your attention off her. But Phaedra's doing a good job holding it together, even though she's looking like, what the fuck is going on? So he says that she voted Ekansu and nobody questioned her. But the next day she got murdered. That's number one. He then says the breakfast reactions. When Marcus got murdered, Phaedra went over and hugged Larsa and was like, I hope you're okay. I hope you're okay. That's his second reason. Tamara gets voted out. And then he ends up saying that she says, excuse me, that she's coming for the housewives. Then Bergie. And then she says, not my Burgerlicious. That's what he claims is the reason that's why. But that's who Phaedra is. You know who Phaedra is. She says shit like that. Phaedra's pissed. Like, she getting mad. But Dan says, and then she's getting mad, but she's holding it together well. But Dan says that she'll never get brought up because everybody likes her, which is the most suspect thing. And I'm pissed listening to her, but that's exactly Dan. That's the Dan that we know. Dan picks up on stuff like that. which is what I've been saying the whole season so far. She's playing the best game because nobody would vote her out because everybody likes her company. So they wouldn't suspect her as a traitor. Phaedra then finally says her piece. She says, so you've been watching me from day one? And he said, yes, because nobody's ever written your name down. Phaedra says lots of people have not gotten their name written down, but that don't mean that they're traitor. He then told her to explain the Ekansu vote. And Phaedra says she did it because the issue that she had with Janelle, and she changed her story. Everybody knows that. He then asked about the reaction, and she said, what reaction? Kate then pipes in, love Kate. She says, not the burgerlicious. That's what's problematic to you? I'm like, exactly. Like, nigga, relax. That's basically what she was giving. Like, relax. Kate's not understanding the logic behind it. And she told him that. I'm not understanding the logic. He says, because it's extra. Like, she's doing extra stuff. Kate says, have you seen her? I'm like, exactly. Phaedra is without a doubt one of the most extra people ever. And Phaedra said it. She said, I'm very extra. She said, I do too much because you do too little. I said, boom, get him. And then she said, you're doing too much right now, but you about to get, and she said, you're pretty much doing too much because you know you about to get banished tonight. So she starts shutting them down. This is where it got interesting because you got to see Dan actually go up against somebody who could literally get his ass. So she said, you trying to put the heat on me because it's bullshit. And she said, you're a 2-time Big Brother winner, which he isn't. He almost won twice, which is what he said, almost. She said, either way, you have knowledge of this game. She said, if there was a mastermind in the house, it sure wouldn't be the dolled up housewife. I said, ooh. And then she said, let's not forget, Burgerlicious voted for you. Last night, who got murdered last night? Burgerlicious. I was like, ooh, you better get him, Phaedra. And then she said, why? Because Dan thought that he was able to get murdered. Is that not correct? He said, but do you think that would be a little too obvious? And she said, why would I vote him out? He said, I didn't say that you wanted to vote him out. She said, but you said that I'm the killer. Basically caught him in his own shit. Like, you trying to paint me as a traitor, and then you trying to say that I didn't say that I would vote you out, or that I didn't say that you would vote him out. That contradicts why you're sitting here pointing me out as a traitor, because wouldn't the traitor vote him out? Phaedra was getting him. So then Bergie then pipes in and says if Phaedra was thinking long-term, she would keep him around because she trusts him. And she said, yeah, and nobody trusts you, talking to Dan. I was like, ooh. And Parvati and Kate both started laughing. And Phaedra then says she didn't know anything about who had the shield, which goes back to Peter's point. And Peter says he told Dan, Parvati, and CT. Obviously, one of the three of them has to be the traitor for sure. And he said he doesn't think that CT is. He said he knows it's between Parvati and Dan, and he knows this is his last night. So he said he knows that they know that he's onto them, and if he gets murdered, use this as proof. Very valid. Parvati then says that there's been a big clique that formed, and if you're not in Peter's clique, you're going to get murdered or banished. And Phaedra ends up saying exactly. I'm like, uh-oh, why do you say that, Phaedra? But nobody caught on to it, so good. But Bergie says all the traitors did is try to divide them, the faithfuls, and they're doing a good job, and Peter concurs. But Dan says that he took a shot, so now they have to pick. And Parvati says the reason as to why she was trusting Dan, and she couldn't even finish it because Peter cut her ass off and said she's trying to separate it. Don't buy that bullshit. I was like, don't even let her speak. Don't even let her get the chance to speak. And she said, let me finish. Like, pretty much let me finish speaking. She said it doesn't feel good to be falsely accused, and we've seen multiple faithfuls sit here and defend themselves and end up getting banished. Basically, she's trying to say that she's in that same situation. She said she trusted Dan because they're connected on day one, and he's a great game player. And she said she may have trusted the wrong person trying to throw it off. And Peter said, don't buy that bullshit. I was like, get her. But it's time to vote. Phaedra says she is furious with Dan. Parvati is hoping that she can shake the target off of her and get it on Dan because it's between them two, essentially. Like, Phaedra's name has come up, but nobody is really looking at her except for one person, but we're going to get to it. But Phaedra votes for Dan because he's been dodging questions and answers, and he's going up under the radar. And she said, you deflected onto the wrong person, but you going to know tonight. You going to learn tonight. I died. I started screaming. I was like, get him, get him. But Sandra ends up voting for Dan because of the evidence that was presented. Peter votes for Parvati because he wants to make sure that the faithfuls win. So essentially, he feels like he had enough votes to get Dan. But if he don't get enough votes to get Dan, Parvati's name is out there, so you can get another traitor. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But John then says he votes Dan because he listened intently. John is me. I would be listening to every single thing that comes out your mouth so I can catch anything and literally build an opinion off of it. But he says, I was listening intently, and your deflection onto Phaedra in the case that was rebutted, basically what Phaedra did, was so comprehensive that he knows for a fact that you were the silent killer. He said, you are the silent slaughterer. And I'm basically like, yes, Phaedra's the lawyer. Don't fuck with her. Like, do not fuck with a lawyer, because she just literally, she handed him his ass. But Parvati votes for Dan. She said it's either you or me at this point. Kevin ends up voting for Dan. Trishelle votes for Dan. She flat out said, you met your match tonight. Keep that in mind. Trishelle is watching. Which, her saying that went two ways. It's like, you met your match like you thought you could get her, or you met your match because she played a better game than you, because she's getting you better, which she is. But Dan ends up voting for Phaedra. He said that he should have known better than to go up against an elegant lawyer. I'm like, you should have. You should have done your research, because you underestimated Phaedra on episode 1. But you know how she is nowadays. You know now. You know now. But CT votes for Dan, Sheree votes for Dan, Bergie votes for Dan, Kate votes for Dan, and MJ votes for Dan. So Dan has been banished. That is the first traitor that has been banished. So Phaedra says, how dare you try to pull that shit in her confessional? And she said he learned tonight, which he did. So Dan gets up. He reveals that he's been on Big Brother twice and nobody's ever written his name down. Which is true when you think about it. Like, Dan was never on that block unless it was time to plead his case to win that money. And he said a lot did today. A lot of people wrote his name down today, and he let them know that he is a traitor. And they start screaming. They all excited. Trishelle then mentions that she thinks Phaedra is a traitor, and she caught on to what Dan's motive was for doing what he did. She said nobody is suspecting it, but he waited so long and knew that he needed to feed them a traitor, which is why she thinks it's Phaedra, and she is not wrong. Which I hope Phaedra can find a way to get around it, because I want Phaedra to win. I do. I want her to win. But if not her, it's going to have to be Peter. But I know coming down the line, it's probably going to be between them two, and they're going to be going at it. But they disperse. They're all excited. John asked Phaedra if she knew what was going on. She said she had no idea. Bergie, Peter, John, Trishelle, and Kevin, they off in the other room pretty much celebrating and talking. Sandra says, should we go in there and go see what the 5 most faithful of the faithfuls are doing? And they all walk in there. They come barging in. And, of course, Parvati is saying, are y'all going to control the rest of the game? And Peter says, yeah, I'm trying to win. Like, I'm trying to win. And Parvati says, it's kind of weird that you come in here shutting doors and shutting people off. And Parvati says, it's between me and Peter. I'm going to take his ass out. Like, Parvati wants to get him gone. But the traitors, they head off to the murder. Phaedra and Parvati. Phaedra says she is pissed. And Parvati says she feels vulnerable, and Phaedra's like, yeah, Peter's the ringleader. Like, he's leading the charge to get your ass out. And Phaedra says that she's not, well, not Phaedra. Parvati says she's not powerless now, and basically saying, like, should we make the decision to get him out? And Phaedra's like, wouldn't that be obvious? Like, should we try and find somebody else? But as they're sitting there deliberating, Alan comes knocking at the door. Tells them they have the opportunity to recruit today. So they can either murder somebody tonight or recruit somebody. And if they choose to recruit somebody, they have to write it down, and he'll go deliver it to them. Now, the person that is recruited can either accept it or refuse it. If they accept it, they join. If they refuse it, they stay faithful, and nobody gets murdered. So it's like, if you take that choice and they say, fuck no, I'm not doing it, you're vulnerable. And you didn't get the chance to take your shot at somebody that might take a shot at you. But Parvati wants to recruit to shake things up, and she says she wants to seduce Peter and recruit him as a traitor. And here's, like I said in a couple of reviews before, I said Parvati is Salt 2.0. If they had Salt, if y'all ain't watched Salt 1 with Angelina Jolie, go watch it. Because Parvati is literally Salt. If they ever were to make a sequel, she would be perfect for it. She says she wants him because she knows he's after her, and there's a risk that he could throw her under the bus. And Phaedra said that she don't know if she could trust him, but Phaedra says not Phaedra. Parvati says that she wants Peter. You see all these P names, it's 3 Ps. But Parvati says she wants Peter because he's the ringleader of all the faithfuls, and she wants him to turn on his friends and murder them all. I was dying. I'm like, you are ruthless. But they make their decision. Peter ends up being recruited, of course. And he says it's the smartest move for them to do it because he knows nobody would suspect it. And he said if he doesn't take it, he feels like he's going to get murdered. Because they know, he knows that they know that he was recruited. And if he ends up getting, if he ends up denying it, he knows he's a hot target and it's too easy. But that was it. That was the end of the episode. It was another fucking fantastic episode. It gets better every single episode. There's not been a bad episode yet. And that's why I love reviewing the show. And that's why I love talking to y'all. Please jump in the comments. Let me know what y'all's thoughts were for the episode. I know y'all got a lot. Keep dropping them in the chat or in the comments. Thumbs up the video. Keep thumbsing it up. The more engagement, the more this video is going to get pushed out, the more we bring more people to us so we can have more conversations. But yeah, I'll be here next Thursday. If you don't watch any of my other content, you'll see me then. If you do, I got a track video coming out probably tomorrow, if not tomorrow, Saturday or Sunday. And then we got Baddies. Ready for that to be done. And then I've started Vanderpump Rules, doing that on Tuesday. So if y'all like that show, check it out. But I'll see y'all then. Peace.